So now we're going to look for the same error, but instead of using the logcat logging, we're going to use a breakpoint and run the debugger that's provided by Android Studio. So if I go into the code and place a breakpoint where we're incrementing current index, so you just do that by pressing next to the number of the line of code. And notice this time I have to press debug app instead of run code, because when you're running it with just this button, it's running it in release mode, so it's how it would be perceived to a user. But when we want to debug and actually experience breakpoints, we have to press this bug symbol. And so this is waiting for debugger. And let's just pull this down so we can see. So we have a breakpoint set. Notice we haven't actually hit that breakpoint yet because we actually have to cause the event to occur. So as soon as I press next, we're going to hit this breakpoint, right? You can see that we've stopped here because there's a blue line. And I can actually pull up this bottom window to see the breakpoint data. So in this window, we can see the frames and variables view. And this is a really powerful tool because we can actually look into the code and see what kind of variables are being set and where the stack is. So for instance, if we go under this, which is the current object, we can see the question bank, which as we expect is of size 6. And I can actually expand this out. And we can see each question object and its res ID. So it's kind of interesting because you can see like what the expected answer for each question is here, and this is just each of these numbers is the ID of the string that we initialized. So I want you to notice that we haven't actually, or if I go to current index, we can't actually see a value, and that's because the way we coded the current index is on your first access we're initializing it to 0, and then from then on we're getting the saved index in the save state handle. And so the way we would see current index is by actually calling it. And so we can go to this window right here for evaluate expression. And I can type in the current index variable and press evaluate, and then it will show the result is 0. So we would expect that because we press next and we put the breakpoint before we've actually incremented the value, so it's still 0. So I can close this. So quickly, just to go over some of the tools inside of the debugger. So we can step over, which allows us to step over a function call. So for instance, if you were debugging a specific, for instance, power function, and there was a function call before it, and you had a breakpoint that was before that function, you wouldn't want to step into the function that you weren't debugging, so you could step over that function. It'll still run all of the code on the inside, but then you can get to the actual line that you want to debug. Then we have step into, which actually will step into the function. So you would be using step over, step over, step over until you reach where you actually want to enter. And then you can use step into to actually step into that function. And then force step into, this is something that we're not really going to have to use, but it's for if you're running third-party methods and you are usually in the Android debugger, it would skip over those because you didn't write the code. But if you really wanted to see what was inside, you could force step into just to see what is being run. And then step out allows you to, so let's say you've entered a function and you're looking at what's going on inside, and you've decided that you're satisfied with what you're debugging, or you have what you need, and you want to step out without ending the program, you can press the step out function, and it'll run the rest of the code, and now you can go to the next line. Then we also have these tools on the left. So this is resume program, which basically from wherever you are, whether you're on a breakpoint or after a breakpoint, but you still have the program paused essentially, you can continue until the next breakpoint hits. And then we can view our breakpoints here. So if I press that, it shows the line that we set, which is the current index plus 1, or the incrementing of current index. And then we can also press mute breakpoints. So that would be useful if you set many breakpoints and you've already, you don't want to continue hitting breakpoints just because you want to see the rest of the behavior of the program uninterrupted. You can press mute and it'll mute all of those breakpoints. And then also we have our usual tools such as rerun and whatnot. And so if I press continue, or let's start by just pressing step over, and you can see that, so I've gone to the next line, which is the end of the function move to next. Then I can go step again, and now I've left the scope of move to next, and now I'm on the next line of next question, which calls move to next. And here's an instance of step into, is I can press step into, enter update question, and see here's the question text res ID, and again I can step over that, and we can see, oh, the ID is this number. And again I can step over that, and here we are back in next question, and again you can still keep going through the stack. And if I press continue, we won't expect to hit any breakpoints because our breakpoint is event driven, but if I press the next button again, we'll hit our breakpoint again for incrementing current index, and I can go to evaluate expression, type in current index, and as expected it's going to be 1 instead of 0 because we actually ran that line of code that increments it. So I'm just going to quickly go over the advantages and disadvantages between logtrace and the debugger. So the logtrace is nice because we can set these logs and see the actual stack trace to get information of what's occurring inside of our program. But the disadvantage is if we wanted to add a new log trace, or if we wanted to get more information, we'd have to stop the app, set a log trace, rebuild, deploy, and then navigate again through the app. And just using the debugger tool, it's really powerful because it's a lot more flexible. You can set breakpoints while the app is running, and you won't have to rerun anything. And it just allows you to poke around throughout the app to find what you're looking for. And so that was all for debugging, the debugger tool, and now I'm going to move on to Android Lint.